Welcome everyone. We have some really exciting stuff to show you. This is going to be a hands-on workshop, if you'd like. You all will have a chance to log into Browsertrix, run a small crawl, and then run QA on that crawl, and we'll talk about that if you would like, or you could also watch as we demo this.
Yeah. So let's jump right in. This is our agenda for today. We're going to do a brief, probably less than 10-minute, if we're being honest, introduction to Browsertrix for anyone who's not familiar. We're going to have our friends Anders and Andy here talk about some use cases and examples of using the software as our IIPC project partners. And then we're going to do some hands-on work. So we'll start with setting up a crawl workflow and running a crawl. And then take a little break, and on the back side of that, we will have you run our new quality assurance tools and try that out. Oh, we duplicated this. That's my mistake. Well, that means more time for Q&A and hands-on work, which is a great thing. And then we'll wrap up with talking about, again, with our project partners, integrating Browsertrix into existing web archiving workflows. Certainly for the hands-on portion of this, a few of us will be available to come around and help and answer any questions.
Okay, yes, maybe at the end.
But also feel free to just interrupt us when there are questions. Meant to be sort of informal and hands-on, so
it's up to you.
don't need to stand on ceremony.
Let's do it at the end.
Okay, so for anyone who's not familiar, Browsertrix, which until very recently we were calling Browsertrix Cloud, we're now just calling Browsertrix, is a high-fidelity integrated open-source web archiving system. So the idea is on top of the crawler you have a nice kind of web-native UI for doing things like creating crawl workflows where you configure how your crawl should be run, scheduling crawls to run at particular periods of time. You can watch your crawls live as the browsers that are running are kind of streamed into the app. We also have some curation and sharing features in collections, which we can show you. Which will actually be useful for the conversation about what you do after QA. When you found that you might have some pages that require some patching, we can use those collections to kind of merge together the original crawl as well as maybe some manual patching work in archive web page into a single collection, single replay that you can download as a single WAC file. One of the really cool features about Browsertrix is the ability to create browser profiles. So you essentially sign in with a real browser, and this is most commonly used for logging into websites that you want to crawl while authenticated. So if you think of social media feeds, for instance, or things that are behind that are maybe staff only that require a certain login. But because you're basically just saving an actual browser state, you can also use that to do things like changing the ad blocking policies in Brave browser, changing how it handles cookies. If you save cookies, like if you click accept or reject on a privacy pop-up, that'll be saved as well, because we're just saving the whole browser along with its whole cookie cache. You can download your archived items and collections as WAC files, and most recently, you can now perform quality assurance on those crawls, which we'll get into in a lot more detail, and you'll be able to have the chance to try hands-on, but essentially compares what the browser saw during crawling against what we see in replay, and gives some automated heuristics or metrics that can kind of inform and assist you in making those judgments about whether the crawl's good enough, if maybe you want to run it again with different session settings, or if it requires manual patching, that sort of thing. So I guess a good place to start for the quality assurance features is what are the actual questions that we want to answer? It's pretty nebulous. We've had there's a lot of different kinds of questions that you could answer with quality assurance. Different institutions have had their own workflows that kind of approach things differently. For us, at the base of it, a question is kind of how well did all of the pages get archived? And if there are issues, can we identify whether those are in the crawl or in the replay? If it's replay, you might handle that differently because you actually have the data and it's just kind of a software bug that we can figure out in the replay engines. But if the issue is actually in the crawl, that's very different, right? You want to go back and crawl it differently. At this stage, the question that you can kind of best answer with the quality assurance features kind of in beta as they are is which pages did the best or worst in a crawl across a couple metrics. We'll show you include screenshot comparisons, extracted text comparisons, resource counts, which is a little weirder and a little more experimental, but we'll look at that. And kind of moving on into the future, questions that we'll want to explore as we continue developing these features and where we're hoping we can kind of get some of your feedback on how it works and directions we could go that it would be actually useful for users, are like how do we improve the pages that didn't archive very well? We have some manual workflows around that. But maybe moving forward, there are things that we can do automatically to like adjust the settings, for instance. And kind of how can we, as Webrecorder and as a web archiving community, I think, use QA systems like this to kind of diagnose and fix replay issues. So if we can kind of flag replay issues at the moment that they're caught, that might save us a lot of work of like people having to file like bug reports and things like that, and might make it a lot easier to create reproducible test cases for fixing those replay issues. Let's hand it off to Anders.
It's now okay.
Yeah. Before we do that, very quick.
So just before we do the actually hands-on, I'll show you some of our use cases and what we've done in at our library. And so this is maybe the basic stuff, and then it gets more and more advanced. So this is very briefly how we do QA now. We have the NetArchive suite, and okay, just give me 2 seconds. Yeah, this is the first for me. 2 slides. I've never done that before, but anyways, so quality assurance. How do we do it now? We have crawl logs in the NetArchive suite. We look at return lists of return codes and try to improve on that and more. We do visual QA, and we do it in Solar Wayback. We have like a production Solar Wayback with all the archive. We have a live Solar Wayback with things that are just recently ingested, so we can do it like maybe 1 day after ingestion. It's not as swift as Internet Archive, but we get it in 1 day, so we can actually do visual QA. And then we have PyWB, where you can do alternative playback, and we may even use replay web page, desktop or whatever to replay it as well. And then we make some tasks with selected sites, maybe let's say 200 sites. How is it going? Does it look good? Do you get the style sheets? Do you get pictures? Whatever. So it's a manual, one person basically doing that. So using Browsertrix and other tools, it's all of the above plus Browsertrix Cloud QA and other tools that will eventually come up. And of course, the interesting thing is also the workflow from crawl to QA to ingest to archive. So if you crawl it well, how do you replay it well, and can you make sure you do that in the future? It's not that easy, as you all know. So this is the Web Archive suite, where you can go in and see like different definitions and look at the metrics here. And then we have a local Browsertrix cloud installation here. You can see, how can you see that? It's only 1.94 down here. It's not the newest version, but it's pretty easy to update, and we got that covered now. And here is the brand new, and you can see here we have crawls, etc. We also use archive web page, so we actually use that for QA as well. If we crawl something rich content, it's very cool to go in here. You will recognize this in the Browsertrix as well. Even go and see, do you have some actual audios, videos here? That's a cool way to do it. And then when we crawl stuff, for instance, Ture sitting down here has been doing a lot of experiments with, for instance, with ads. If you open a news page today and you don't have ad blocker, you are just bombarded with all kinds of ads that takes over the page. So Heritrix can't get this, but we can do that with Browsertrix. So let's see this one if it's actually the one of them. But let's see here. So this is actually something you would never see in Heritrix, but we can actually see here that we get this crawled, and we can replay that in Browsertrix. There is something with on the top here, but you can see this is just checking over the page, and you get video stuff like this. This looks like completely dynamically created video links, but actually there's a link to MP4. That's pretty interesting. So you could crawl this with Heritrix as well. So, but the point is, you don't get the commercials, and you don't get other dynamic content. So this is great for experimenting. If you want ads in your archive to describe the history, then that's a good tool. So that's one way we used it. Also, for instance, trying to get YouTube content, still very interesting. We've done quite some experiments with that. And one thing we can see is you can get embedded YouTube content, but sometimes it's a bit finicky when you have commercials in front. You get maybe the video behind it, but to replay it with both the commercial how is it skipped and how does it get to the real content? But for instance, here it's actually, I think it's actually playing. So we can definitely see, okay, you can crawl some YouTube, and I've even used accept a YouTube cookie.
Hvor man faktisk ser, at det her ikoniske spir, det
Maybe that's because
vælter.
I didn't do that a few versions ago. But here I have some.
Det er desværre ikke kun aktiemarkedet, der er rødt, men også selve børsen i København, der nemlig her til morges gik i flammer. 400 år varetegn i flammer, en af de vigtigste bygninger i Danmark, så når du åbner, hvad end det er DR-nyheder eller TV2, så er det her altså breaking news, der også går hele verden.
Back to you.
Thank you.
Man faktisk ser, at
sorry.
det her vælter.
Close all. Abort. Okay, it's going.
Cool. So I think at this point, you all can go ahead and start signing up. And as you do that, I think Ilya is going to talk as I drive, and we'll show you how you actually create a crawl workflow and start crawling.
And if you already have an account, you could log in with your existing credentials. We've renamed beta.browsertrix.cloud to app.browsertrix.com. So sort of it'll redirect if you use the old URL.
But even if you have an existing account, go ahead and
register. Yes,
and
you should register by clicking on the sign up link.
Let's log out. Yeah, go ahead and click the sign up link up in the upper right hand top, and whether you have an account or not, it'll take you into the org that we're using for this demonstration. Gil.
Okay,
as you renamed this previously, you had Browsertrix and Browsertrix Cloud, and the non-mentioning Browsertrix now it runs in the cloud. We're all accessing it. I take. So, what is there an opportunity still for people to operate it on site?
Oh yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. In fact, we renamed it so that it's clear that you could run it in the cloud or not in the cloud, because you can run it anywhere.
And so now it is the same product running in both places.
Yes.
Right.
It is now just called Browsertrix instead of Browsertrix Cloud, because if it's called Browsertrix Cloud and you do run it yourself, that's maybe not in the cloud. So we actually renamed it for that reason.
Yeah, and the crawler remains the same as Browsertrix crawler. Yeah.
There's a new little SVG in the corner, and
yes, it's very cute.
Thanks.
Sneak.
You should go and log out and do register just so that you get to the
so I'm going to log in here. I'm already registered on this account.
Then that will add you to the
If you already registered and you already, for example, are a client or one of the IIPC testers and have an organization, to switch, you should be able to go to the upper right-hand corner here, and you'll see we want to be in the WAC 2024 workshop organization. If you're just registering for the first time, it'll just take you right there.
Yeah, so first we'll do kind of a brief intro to starting a crawl. A lot of you have already familiar. For those that aren't, before we can QA something, we need a crawl. So we'll go in the, so from your dashboard, you can click on Create New, and then Crawl Workflow. And then you'll be taken to this screen, and we'll do a seeded crawl, which is basically you start with a single seed, and we'll crawl pages from that seed. And from here, you could enter a URL for whatever you want to crawl. We haven't thought of a demo URL.
Anyone want to shout out? Well, here, I already kind of did this, but let's do the IIPC website.
Yeah, and then we have a few different settings here. We could select your crawl scope. If we click on that, it'll show you, there's a few options. You could start with a prefix, have all pages on the domain. I think for now we'll just use the default option. And what else are we going to do here? And actually we configure this org to limit it to 50 pages, just so that we can limit these crawls to be small enough that we can QA them.
Within the confines of the workshop.
This workshop. And let's see, we'll probably leave the other settings as is for now.
Yeah, I'll say there are a lot of options here that you can use, but all you really have to do minimally is put in a URL here, and then go to Review and Save, and then Save Workflow, and that's all you have to do at minimum to use the kind of default settings.
Yeah, and then you can basically click Next, and then start crawl, and you'll be taken to a page like this with so this is the exciting part where everyone starts a crawl at the same time. And we'll see what happens.
While we deal with the inevitable issues with any live demo, our crawl is diligently running in the background. So you can see these are different browser instances that are being streamed into the UI, so you can watch what the browsers are doing as they go, which is its own sort of preliminary form of QA in some way. I've certainly used it that way before we had other features.
Running to a whole maybe just it takes a little while. Yeah, but it just normally goes.
It does take a minute for the crawls to get going, because in the background it's spinning up new containers for each crawler instance. So and there's some dynamic resizing of the resources and stuff that goes on. That's the Kubernetes magic part of it. And I'll also say, for anyone who's comfortable reading Python code, the backend tests pretty much exclusively drive the app through the API, so it has nice little snippets you can use for, like, how do I log in, how do I create a user, things like that.
Since we're all running crawls at the same time, there might be a slight delay, but they should all start eventually.
Yeah, and in the meantime, our crawl finished, and kind of the easiest first thing you can do to get a sense of what's there is to click Replay Latest Crawl, and it'll open up the replay right in our replay webpage, replay engine inside Browsertrix. And here we're navigating our web archive. It's all coming from the crawled content, nothing from the live web. Let's see, we only did 50 pages, so at some point we'll hit something that didn't get crawled. Yeah, there we go. And then it gives you a little option if you want to try to load it in the live web, but gives you kind of warning before that. Other things before we jump into QA that might be helpful. The Files tab here is where the WAC file that was created is. You can click it and download it. There's also a little icon indicating that it's already been backed up into a secondary storage bucket. There are error logs if there were any errors in the logs, and you can also download the full crawl log through this download logs button.
Are the logs included in the WAC file?
They are, yes. Yeah, so this is basically just streaming those files right from within the WAC. Yeah. And you can see your crawl settings here that were used for the crawl. The cool thing about WAC too, if you're not familiar, is that, I guess this is a little slow, but we have, let's take this, we have our WAC file here, which I really should have cleaned up my desktop before we did this, huh? Oh well, no secrets. Because it's actually a zip file, this doesn't work on every computer, but on macOS you can just rename it zip, the extension, and then double click it and it'll open it up. Right. Other archive like, Stuffit or 7-zip or whatever is able to open it up as well. So this is our WAC file. You have all of the works that were created. If you just use works, you could just copy these right out and kind of ignore the rest if you'd like. You can see they're all named with kind of the organization name as well as a timestamp, things like that. So they all have unique names. We have our CDX indexes here, CDXJ, our crawl log, which is all in JSON lines format.
Tessa, will you make your screen bigger?
Yes. Sorry. And we have our pages file, which is something that's kind of unique to WAC, but is cool. So here, the pages.jsnl file has information about each of the seeds. So in this case, we really just have the one, but we have our URL, timestamp. The load state indicates basically how well captured the page was, how far along the process it went. We have some extracted text.
So what is used for? In your pages, you have made this JSON page. What is used for?
It's used in Replay web page to be able to easily grab information about the pages, as well as we use it in Browsertrix to actually read information about those pages into the database for the QA feature, which we'll look at in a minute. And probably some other things too.
Yeah, and it's part of the WAC format, which is a format that we've been developing. There's a spec for it, and it kind of extends.
So do we need it when we replay the WAC files in a replay web page? Then
not if you're using work directly, I think.
Yeah, you don't need it, but so for those who aren't familiar, the WAC format is a format that we've created that sort of wraps work files into a zip file and adds additional metadata, as Tessa was just showing, and that's to kind of add things that are missing from work, which is a list of pages. So everything in a work is a resource or a response record, and that's not enough to distinguish between things that are just JavaScript or things that are actual pages that are loaded in the browser. And so we've created a page list to have a list of entry points that are useful for a user to start browsing a web archive, and that's
and it's documented on our specification site along with CDXJ and a couple other formats for what exactly goes into the WAC, including the pages files. Well, let's jump back to Browsertrix. Hey, look at all those crawls.
Yeah, so look like we'll probably spend a few more minutes finishing up the crawls, and then we'll we can jump into QA after that. I think.
You can search for the crawl workflows. Like, for instance, I was like, I don't know where mine is in these 4 pages, but I know that oh, come on. That's just rude.
Oh yeah, that's broken.
Oh, well, apologies.
I need to follow both.
So instead, we'll look for my name.
That's show only. Show only.
Oh yeah.
That's a whole option. Which also isn't working.
Oh no, yeah, it is. It might be. I think I might be having a cache issue too. I should open my DevTools. There we go. So I did the same crawl right before the workshop, and here's our crawl that we just did. While that's going, I can show you some other things. So we talked about browser profiles. This is how that works. You go to the Browser Profiles tab, click New Browser Profile. We're going to give it a starting URL. I'll do webrecorder.net. Start that. It'll take a second. And now we've got a browser going. So unfortunately, I think it's pretty small, but I don't know that I can blow this up super well. I can full screen it. Thank you. But so like we could go to Mastodon and log in. We could go to Instagram and log in. I want to show you the thing that I do most often is to actually go to the Brave settings page. Because here we can do things like changing the settings for whether it blocks scripts and trackers and ads. It kind of comes with some default standards that the browser just rolls out for privacy. But you can disable them all if you want and then save that browser and capture all of the ads. You can also go into content filtering here and see, for example, the easy list cookie option is enabled, which will try to kind of auto hide things like privacy pop-ups that rely on cookies. It's not perfect, but it's kind of it's a nice option. But if you don't want that, you can disable that, and there's additional lists here that Brave makes available. You can also just give a URL to essentially a plain text file with regular expressions that you want to block each on a new line, or just add them in right here. But kind of like any browser settings that you want to change, you can do that. So let's say I want to capture ads. I'll disable that. Disable fingerprinting, blocking. Disable blocking cookies, and we're just gonna really be like, it's fine. We don't care about our privacy at all.
That's interesting.
You know, so on. And then we can go ahead and save this, and we'll say, show me all the ads. Give it a little description. And now we have our browser profile. If we want to test that we're logged in, for example, if we had like logged into Instagram or something, you can click edit and it'll bring up the browser so you can see the current state of that browser, which is a nice thing. Takes a second. But yeah, there we go. We could go back to Brave settings and verify that our shield settings are all still the same. And when you're creating a crawl, you can use this browser settings tab here and just pick the browser profile that you want to use, and it'll crawl with like all of those settings, logins, any cookies that you accepted, anything like that, which is pretty cool. I'll move on to.
This is not tied to one computer specifically, because as you log in with another browser on a different computer, it would still be the same.
Yes, it spins up a virtual machine where your browser lives in the cloud. So no matter what computer you access the browser profile and or Browsertrix, basically everything in this system, if I logged into your account on my computer, it would all operate the exact same way. Because it's over there. Nothing is done locally.
And do you have one browser it always uses, or can you use different browsers?
So by default, we use Brave browser, which is Chromium based. You can, with the crawler, build it off of other browsers. In the past, we've used Chrome and Chromium, but it's a little technically involved to do that. You have to kind of rebuild a Docker image based on that. So there is in GitHub Browsertrix. What is the name of it again? Browser base?
Yeah, and it's a little
Yeah. So we have this repository that you could basically build a Docker file, a Docker container from this with the browser of your choice, and then build the crawler from that. But it's involved, and it's less well documented than the things that we can support kind of by default.
Would it be a good idea to change to another browser when you are talking about ads or something like that? Because ads is that's difficult. Brave is against each standard blocked, and you have to manipulate that to get the ads. But sometimes it's the rendering, and I think it's the cookies also times out faster.
I wanted to talk to you about that actually, because I was curious about that. But I think in our testing we haven't noticed a significant difference between this and Chrome or Chromium. We also moved over for sort of technical reasons, which is that packages for like Debian, Ubuntu, Linux weren't being built for Chromium anymore, weren't being released. So it was like Canonical as a company just stopped doing that. So it became more difficult to support the latest versions of Chrome and Chromium. But we haven't noticed significant changes with Brave, and I find the browser is kind of more configurable. So you do have to go in if you want to allow all ads and create that browser profile one time. But because that's not tied to cookies, like those settings shouldn't expire. So it's kind of a one and done thing, and then you can just use that browser profile if you want.
And to QA.
Yeah, let's go to QA. So.
So hopefully everyone or most of you have one crawl that's finished, and now we're gonna demo the new QA features.
Yeah, so to get to QA, you need to go to your crawl. You can do that either from the workflow and then click on the crawl in the crawl list here. You can also go to the archived items tab to show only mine and find your crawls there. There's also some QA indicators here that we'll come back to in a minute. And then there's the quality assurance tab here. Right off the bat, you see a page list that has all of the pages, title and URL, as well as some data that we haven't populated yet that kind of has to do with our QA process. But what we're going to do to start analyzing it is click Run Analysis in that corner. And what it's doing in the back end is basically recrawling, but instead of crawling from the web, it's crawling from our WAC and kind of comparing the screenshots and extracted text that we took during that original crawl to what we see in the replay when we load the pages from that WAC file in replay webpage.
And so it'll probably take about the same amount of time as running the original crawl. We don't have a way to watch it, but there is you'll see a status indicator that will switch to running once it starts running, and so it'll be kind of a similar amount of time, and it'll show you a progress bar since it knows exactly how many pages there are. We can estimate exactly how long it'll or what the progress is as the QA analysis is running.
In the meantime, just to speed up the demo, we have a completed QA run on Oh, never mind. Someone else started one and canceled it. We gotta wait.
Question?
Sorry.
Thanks.
The QA function is possible because you are creating WACs. It's the data that's held in a WAC that allows it.
Yes, we'll show in a minute sort of all the data is self-contained in a set of files, and so that allows us to then and we include additional data such as screenshots and extracted text and resources, and that allows us to compare that at crawl time versus replay time. And yeah, and we'll get to that in a minute. And
what I'm wondering is, if somebody had a WAC and they created the content types, etc., that you have in a normal WACC, would they load it into here and QA the content of the WAC?
Not likely, because we're the crawl has to be run with specific settings. You have to be taking the screenshots in kind of the format that we do by default with our crawls. You have to be extracting the text to work. And we additionally write work info records into the work that contains information like what are all the resources for this page with their MIME types and status codes, how many JavaScript errors were there on that page, and that kind of stuff is also consulted. So it also won't work with WACCs created by older versions of the crawler. It's very much a like from now forward sort of thing.
I will say that, like, in theory, if someone wanted to approach us and sort of adopt the exact specs that we create for their own crawler, I'm sort of speaking out of turn. I feel like this is really an Ilya question, but like, I'm sure we'd be willing to work with that person to make it interoperable, or rather, they would have to work with us to make their thing interoperable. It's not something that we're prepared to do right now, and like, should it come to it, we're pretty open, but
well, it's hard to do if you don't have the data to start with, because
yes,
if you don't have screenshots at the time at crawl time, there isn't anything to compare to. But there are things that we could do part of the way. And
what I'm saying is, if someone wanted to create the exact same data that we do, but with their little crawler that they have, in theory, it could be made to be interoperable.
Yeah, it could be adapted to other workflows. Yeah, for sure.
But like one thing first, man, this took a long time.
So yeah, our page comparison is done. It's just generating the WACC for this analysis run now, and once that is finished being uploaded to the S3 bucket on the back end, we'll be able to review our call. Yeah, there we go. So, right off the bat, you'll notice we have a kind of meter bar here that gives a high-level idea of, based on the screenshot and text comparisons, how many pages were kind of like a good match, like sort of in the middle, there's a bad. These percentages that we picked are sort of arbitrary because it's the first time we are doing this. So it might be something that we can tweak or even make configurable moving forward. But we can see, for example, like 48 out of our 50 pages had an over 90% match based on pixel matching in the screenshots between the crawl and replay, which is really good. Text, 46 pages were over 90%. We had one that was between 50 and 90, and one that was less than 50. And I have a feeling I know what's going on there, so that might be an interesting thing to look at in a minute too. But the meat of the review is if you click the review crawl button right here. Let's see if we can make this a little bigger without messing up the layout.
Are other folks able to get to this screen with their finished QA runs? Anyone having any issues getting there? So you can, if not, okay. So this is our QA review screen where there's lots of stuff on here. The first tab that you see is the screenshot comparison tab. And we see the crawl screenshot and the screenshot created during analysis from the replay. There's also a slider bar that you can, if you click on the little icon to the left of the URL, it will give you a slider bar where you could and the way that this is sorted is that the worst screenshot match pages are shown first, and that's kind of intentional so that you could see what the most problem pages are out of this crawl. And so it looks like this is the most problematic page out of all the pages in this crawl according to the screenshot ranking. yeah, and from here, we could also switch to the text tab, and the text, and you can see that the screenshot only matched 87%, but the text actually matches 100% in this case. And if there was less than 100% match, it'll show you where the text differences are. So we could also sort by worst text match. So in this case, for whatever reason, this the text analysis differs, and let's see which page this is.
This is the video spotlights, and actually, I was going to use this as an example tomorrow during our other talk, but whatever. People can see it twice, or I can find another example for tomorrow. I think what happened here is that this page, because it has a bunch of videos, after the actual HTML page is loaded, it takes a little while for all the assets to load, and I think the screenshot and text extraction were being taken before they fully loaded. And the reason why I think that, although the screenshot for this one is good, actually.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's kind of interesting that the screenshot match is 100%, whereas the text match is only 47%. Usually we see it the other way around, but yeah, so
that might just mean that some piece of text that's off the screen, because it only takes the initial viewport, is different. So there could be any number of text that's different on the page, but if it's not in the main sort of above the fold section, it could
not
be
for text,
not
for
for text.
screenshots.
for screenshots. Right, but no,
Yes.
I'm explaining the discrepancy.
right. The text is showing the
I guess the important thing to note here is that all of these heuristics, screenshots, text, resources, they're things that you can use to inform your QA process, but while it will hopefully speed things up dramatically to understand like what is most likely similar, the whole point of the review process is to surface those things faster and get that to you faster instead of having to sort through every single page and pretend you're a robot.
There's a few questions.
There are a few questions.
Yeah.
Who are we starting with?
I think in the back you were first, yeah.
How do I get the slider?
Yeah.
When you see the two screenshots next to each other.
It's this little button here next to the URL that I think we're gonna make look more like a button soon, because
We'll improve that.
I didn't know that was there for a couple days either.
Wait, what? Oh.
Thank you.
You're welcome. No,
This is like, what is this
So,
next
I'm
wizardry?
wondering about the 100% because I can see the little icon for I think it's the clock on the top is not present in one of the shots. The small white circle, I don't know what it is exactly. So
Which one?
yeah, if you slide the bar, the white spot disappears in the picture.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the time?
Watch later or something.
Much time.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because I think that's also looking at the text. Your signed out videos you may watch might be added. This does seem like kind of text that maybe YouTube pops up over the video.
Yep.
That was maybe it. So there might be a timing issue here. But it is interesting. We'll have to look into why that didn't register on the screenshot difference.
Then it should not be 100%.
No, that was
it might have been rounded.
Yeah, that's why we have to look into it.
Okay, I've got one where I'm denied for
Sorry. Who's first? You.
Built here before you develop to compare WACs created at different times to see differences between captures at different dates.
Probably.
Yes, in the future, that's something that could be done. Yeah, absolutely.
So if I have a WAC created in today and one from a year from now, can I compare those two kind of similar to what you built here already? Because I want to see what the differences are.
Yes, that's something that we've thought about. Yeah, in the future, that might be something that comparing two different captures at different times versus crawl versus replay, that is something that should be possible with adapting the system. We don't have that functionality now, but in the future,
I'm just curious as to if you were thinking about that.
We would probably also want to display it with a little bit of a different UI that's less focused on like approve or unapprove these pages, which we'll get to in a moment. But yeah, the backend is definitely there.
And the other thing is, because you can run multiple of these analysis runs, like if we go back to the crawl, we can rerun it, and we'll see it'll be another one in the list. We can flip between them. if, for example, in the future we fix some replay bugs, then you could rerun it again to see like, oh, does it match better now that the replay has had certain issues fixed, for example?
Right. Yeah, and because the QA itself is also a crawl, so maybe it will be an average of multiple ones where we're So, we'll have more questions. Ian?
The slider, you compare the screenshots, the slider is not active in the right. To the right. Yeah, so you could go to it so, but if you want to go down the page.
The screenshots that's taken in the crawler. So the crawler has the ability to do kind of the initial viewport, full page or a thumbnail, but for
now,
the crawls in Browsertrix for now, we're just doing the initial viewport. So the extracted text is everything from the full page, but the screenshot's just kind of what you see up front.
And then we might add more things in the future, but we wanted to start simple, so just doing a same dimension screenshot comparison.
The thing that I think also might add a little more clarity is the screenshot includes the scroll bar right now. It's not a real scroll bar, not the slider, but like that one. It's part of the screenshot. It's just like part of the image. Maybe it shouldn't be.
Ian, you've been waiting for a while.
So similar to the question that was asked earlier, if I have a WAC file captured by a different web archiving platform or tool, are there any plans or any way for me to perform a similar sort of side-by-side comparison of the two using a UI like this?
There could be, yeah. We should kind of. The plan is to standardize kind of what is included. So, for example, there needs to be screenshots and extracted text in the WAC file, and then that would be, and also an info record that contains all the data, and then yes. So as long as we generate the same data, it should be possible to do that.
So yeah, actually, it makes sense to write that up as a specification itself.
Yes,
and then other tools could aim for compatibility.
I think that's the plan. We just haven't had time to do that, but just like the WAC spec, we'll plan to write out what we're doing to be able to generate this.
Yeah.
If the replay looks much better than a screenshot during analyze, can it force to re-screenshot?
You could rerun the QA. Yeah, so there could be a variety of reasons why that. You could run another analysis run, and sometimes it's better on a second try, just because, because the screenshot at replay time is also a best effort. It's loading it and it's taking a screenshot. So sometimes.
The other thing here is like in the crawl workflow, we have an option that's newer. That's this delay after page load. Partially because of these timing issues. That like some sites are just slow to load even after the HTML is technically loaded, which is what we were kind of checking for before. So you could change this to 5 or 10 seconds, and it'll like give content time to visually represent the way it should be when a user actually interacts with it. And if you do that, it would apply to the crawl, but I believe the QA run as well.
It applies to both.
Yeah, so you could change the settings and try it again, and it would maybe get you different results.
Yeah. Should we show the resources tab?
Yeah.
And kind of have to.
So this is the tab that is probably the most experimental here, or the most like.
We're still figuring out what to do with this, and so we have screenshots. So we have 3 dimensions basically. We have the screenshots, we have a text, and then we have resources tab. And the resources actually has a breakdown of when a browser loads a page, all the different types of resources that are loaded as part of that page, and that includes the HTML. So in this case, there's one HTML page. If there are iframes, there could be more. The CSS style sheets, JavaScript, images, fonts. If there's video, it'll include that. And and this kind of presents a breakdown of what is actually different in during crawl and replay. And so in this case, we see that that it's mostly the same, but there is an other that is so we actually have one additional bad resource that's loaded during replay that wasn't loaded during crawl time, and that could indicate that the replay is doing something weird, or that the site behaves slightly differently when it's replayed than when it was crawled.
Yeah, there are. I've been kind of looking into these numbers because at first we were like, there's often mismatches that seem strange. Like, why would replay have more resources than the crawl? And some of it is also things that I think we can incrementally improve as we work on this feature, because there's also issues like the crawler reuses the same browser for a few pages, right? So there might be resources that it's already fetched and cached, whereas when we're loading it in replay web page during the analysis run, we're loading it a page at a time. So something like the favicon or whatever, it's going to like try to load and might fail. And that's why like the replay might not have the same cached resources that the crawl did, and so these counts can get a little weird. But it's definitely something where I think we want to dig deeper and see like what kind of meaningful things that we can come up with this data.
It's pretty interesting. I have a site with lots of embedded video, and I can actually, when I go to the replay resources, and I can see there's actually MP4s there, but I don't see it here. But I see that a lot when you do also in Solo Wayback. You don't get the video resources. It's just something completely different in terms of the type. So one thing that could be really interesting is when you're on a replay, you browse your way through to see the actual video files. If you could have a link back to where is this actually happening in the crawl. I know in Solo Wayback we have that for images, not for videos yet. But so if you search for images, like, okay, where is this actually used in the archive, and you click it and you get a list of results, because it's just so intricate and complex. Where is this actually used, this video? I'm not sure you have that traced back, but it could be interesting to see where in the crawl is this MP4 used. That could be immensely helpful.
We would know where. Yes, we'll probably improve this to also actually list the actual URLs, because this is all from one page. So this is all. So this is a breakdown from.
But when I do replay here, it could be really helpful to have like links to where it's in the crawl. I don't know if it's even possible, but
like annotate it somehow.
Basically, a resources view for the single page.
Yeah. So this tab is the most experimental so far.
We've experimented like with mock-ups with a couple of different versions of this view, and each of them sort of have different advantages and disadvantages. This was the one that we implemented first, but there will probably be more in the future.
Yeah, we have more detailed data. And the other thing is there are also some features here before we move on to Andy, I think, that we haven't talked about yet, which is like how you actually comment, approve, mark what the quality is. So if we go to our worst extracted text and we look at this one,
yeah, so we also have manual.
There's weird things going on here. So maybe we're like, you know what, this page is gnarly and it needs more issues. And we can come in and say, text match is terrible, screenshot semi-okay. We could then, if you have multiple people working on QA, someone could come back later and be like, meh, seems fine to me, or whatever. And then we can do this like, these pages that are 100%, like, oh yeah, that looks nice. You can also navigate between the pages like through the right-hand side or these next and previous buttons. And when we go back to the page list, we can actually sort these by like how many columns they have, whether the page was approved or rejected, and go straight back into the review dashboard from here. And then when you kind of have an idea what you think of this crawl overall, we also have a 5-point rating here and the ability to update the crawl's description based on what you saw in the QA. So for this one, we could say fair. Comme ci, comme ça. And when we go back to our archived items, we see, like in the crawl list, we can see the QA rating. We can sort by the QA rating. We also have these little indicators, like whether we've analyzed this crawl or not, or whether we started a run and it failed, or something like that. So it could be a way for you to kind of easily like, okay, we have thousands of crawls. It's easy when it's 2, right? Those thousands of crawls, you can be like, what was that really bad one again? And pull it up pretty quickly and then decide what you want to do about it.
Question? Thomas, you have a question?
Thank you. I am wondering if you would consider putting shortcuts on those buttons for like the
keyboard shortcuts? Yeah, it's probably a good idea.
Because I use an Xbox controller to do some of the same stuff. then I can convert Xbox inputs to.
You won me over right now. Great.
Thousands, I thought Xbox. Perfect.
Yeah.
This hasn't had like a full accessibility pass yet, which is something that I've been meaning to do, but we'll probably get to it in the coming weeks. One of those things would include keyboard navigation, and then shortcuts, I think, are sort of a next step of like assigning your keys to get really quick about, reviewing your crawls.
You could also consider making a hardware tool for people to provide fast navigational tool. You could make big button. Just an idea. Big button. Yeah, exactly. Red and green.
Now, very quickly, we're going to pass it on to Andy Jackson to talk about Browsertrix use at the UK Web Archive.
Answer your question.
And then we'll answer more questions at the end.
Yeah, so everyone should just keep playing. I'm just going to talk a bit about the issues I faced trying to deploy Browsertrix Cloud as it was, Browsertrix at in an institutional context. It's just, if anyone has further questions on that kind of thing, we can get into that later, but I'll briefly describe what I did while I was there. We'll get to that. So, just to give a brief overview, so one of the things we did at the Web Archive was kind of, when the domain crawl came along, we had to adapt our crawl architecture, a crawl system, so it's all quite separate. So there's an ingest bit which we run multiple heritrixes, and there's anything that outputs walks and logs into the right place. Yes, go.
They. Not we.
Sorry, fine. Past tense. Yes. Gil's now me at the British Library. It gets confusing. Anyway. So anything they store on their Hadoop cluster. Let's not talk about that at the moment. This is I'm talking pre-October. Okay, right. As long as it meets the data standard. Anything that we put into the system can be indexed. This is always done so that we could add more crawlers. And I'm just going to briefly talk about what I found when I tried to add Browsertrix to the cloud. So this is try and describe a roadmap of what if we just started by adding Browsertrix as an additional crawler for doing bits and bobs, but Heritrix is still the workhorse. So in that context, I think some of the more traditional institutions might resonate with this. Actually, getting Kubernetes set up was the hard bit because there was very little institutional support for it, and so we had to kind of spin that up ourselves. If you can get cloud or institutional support for that, that was our biggest barrier. We did need some minor changes to Browsertrix itself, which in the context of the project we worked on was all fine. It was minor things about mail server configurations which were weird and that kind of stuff. But so the point is, the deployment issues weren't that bad. Updating was pretty good. The user feedback was very good compared to our existing system. The users are quite distant from the crawls in our existing system, but as you've seen, you get this very hands-on live experience, and all the curators really love that. It's the only credible option I'm aware of for doing paywall crawls in the domain of web archiving, and that's a big deal for the British Library. At the time, failed crawls could be quite mysterious. Now, I think there's been work done on that since that, but that was the thing we found at the time. A lot of our challenges are around downstream integration. So the policy of the library is that everything gets virus scanned before it goes in the archive, and that would need adding. But because we're doing it for special one-offs, we can kind of get away with it. You know, it's not that bad, but it's something we'd have to worry about if we did a lot. The main thing we had is because we're not planning on using Browsertrix as the service, it's just part of a chain, is we needed some kind of invent some kind of protocol for tagging things as done. So say those crawls are done, and then that okays some script to siphon the stuff off and ingest it into the main collection. We didn't get as far as defining that, but there's enough flexibility in the tagging and other things that. But the point is, you'd have to. I don't know if it's worth defining a standard protocol for that across the tool, but at least an institution should know clearly how to indicate when something's done, ready for passing on. And the last bit was, of course, WAC versus WACZ. And so what I was hoping to do at the time was improve the tooling so we could store the WACZs directly without futzing with them and index them directly, as you know, and make them available just on the same level of WACs, because our general principle was, and hopefully still remains, kind of a minimal intervention. You do as little as possible to your archival resources as you can, because every time you intervene, you risk damaging things. Which is why I don't like virus scanning and think it should be done later. Anyway, and then there was the incident. Well, technically there were 2 incidents. I submitted my resignation, and then 4 days later we were hacked. So I won't say anything that's not in the public domain. Sorry. The British Library has been admirably open about its experiences, and you should check their report on their response to the attack. That's all I'll say. But anyway, severely, the web archive itself is severely affected by this, and so everything from now on is me, what I was expecting to plan on doing in that future, and your future may vary from that future. So anyway, so the next step would be beyond Browsertrix being this kind of add-on for special occasions, is can we make it the frequent crawler? So can we make it the thing which does all the curated crawls, even if we don't throw the domain crawls at it? So what were the barriers to that? I was looking at, and these aren't necessarily showstoppers, they're just the things I'm noting are gaps between our existing solution and Browsertrix as it was in October, right? So
number 1 is already implemented.
Yeah, exactly. Except, do you do sitemaps for sitemaps?
We do now, yeah.
Yes. Oh, I didn't know.
Very
okay,
recently.
anyway, but,
Yeah, so
okay, cool. I might have a big report for you. But anyway, but that's good. So
Yes,
exactly.
Yeah, so we're trying to move quickly.
And these are again. This is literally me freezing time in October. So you know, we're used to overriding the crawl delay as well as robots.txt for sites. We've been packaging crawl time screenshots for a long time. We'd like to do that in a consistent way. Maybe that means fully adopting the way Browsertrix does it, but there would just be something to be evaluated, right? Yeah. We'd have to sort out virus scanning, and we'd have to sort out deduplication, because a lot of our crawls are very PDF intensive, and we couldn't run it as it is. The biggest unknown for that was we'd become past tense, very dependent on doing this continuous crawls, where we're running really long crawls on sites, and every day we're going to get the new stuff, but the same crawl is running constantly and going deeper and deeper all the time as well. So it's kind of, although it's one crawl queue, it's effectively getting the new stuff new and then deep. Whereas if you're going back on regular frequencies, so doing that kind of continuous crawling, we hadn't resolved how to do that in a Browsertrix world. What an unknown also is how much hardware would this need? We crawl, I can't remember, was it a couple of thousand seeds a day, I think, off memory. I mean, we're over 1,000 Twitter seeds, and they're kind of useless now. But there was at least 1,000 or so non-Twitter seeds every day. Reasonably high throughput. Would we need more kit? Don't know, you know. And then there's integrations, you know, people need to log in and have a login that's consistent across our services and blah, blah, blah. So there's a bit of that, but it was within range, at least back in October. And then the final section is just could we do everything with Browsertrix, right?
Do we?
Well, go on then, promise me. So the problem is the domain crawl, right? In the way we ran it in the past, it's millions of hosts, billions of URLs in about 3 months. So you're talking 400 URLs per second over millions of hosts. I am skeptical as to whether we have the kit for that. I think it's possible in principle, but I don't know. So there are also some minor, we do geolocated inclusion rules. There's more complicated inclusion rules we have to get to. But it's fun. Yeah. So for the long term, whether we could move everything onto that, it's not clear whether running everything through Browsertrix would be appropriate But it would be a good question to really, if people get to explore it at scale, perhaps you or any of your customers or partners do, it would be really good to see anything from that to help institutions like the National Libraries and Archives work out how far they could really push it and what the hardware and infrastructure requirements might be. And that's all I have. I hope that was okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Cool.
Very cool.
Oh no, question from...
Well, you'll be pleased to know that I have a question for Ilya. Oh, it's about performance. To turn around, what would you need to do that much data? But if you say, how much data, in your experience, can you process, how many URLs, etc., in a month? Or any frequency you determine, and we can obviously scale.
It's not so much about the data, it's about I think the most limiting resource here is the CPU and memory. Probably memory, actually, more because the browsers are fairly memory intensive. So it's, yeah, so I think the metrics are a little bit different because obviously there's a cost to running the browsers and sort of how much, yeah, so we're still figuring that out exactly what. Well, hopefully we'll have some metrics soon.
Yeah, and when you're looking at the crawl scale options in the crawl workflow in Browsertrix, we limit it to be kind of reasonable in terms of like cost and balancing a bunch of users using it at the same time and things like that. But theoretically, that could scale hugely. You could have hundreds of browsers going at the same time. And Kubernetes is sort of built to be able to scale up that way really well and is used at that scale for other applications all the time. But yeah, it would be expensive, I think.
I think we've had up to 32 internally.
Yeah, I mean,
sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, and right now when everyone ran crawls, it dynamically allocated machines in the cloud for the duration of this workshop, and now they're being, I think they already spun down right now, and so like that's basically how it's designed to run when it's in the cloud, that it sort of allocates additional infrastructure when there's more crawls. But yeah, so we're still learning how that works exactly in terms of costs and whatnot.
Question?
Yeah. Do you have a Docker version for people to install easily?
So the crawler itself runs in Docker. The rest of the infrastructure requires Kubernetes because Docker alone isn't enough to provide the kind of guarantees that are needed to be able to reliably run crawls and do the things that are needed. So Docker is part of it, but it's not the full solution.
So in the Docker version, I cannot run the QA.
No. You could. Well, the QA stuff is in the Docker version. It's just more manual. It would be by a command line. So all of this is in the Browsertrix crawler. We've updated documentation for that as well, and yeah, so we have docs on this.
But actually, that's a good point. In the QA tab, there was the list of analysis runs. If you click the little hamburger icon next to it, you can actually download that WAC out. So it has the work with all the screenshots. It has all the extracted text. It has all those comparison records. So you don't get the nice UI to look through it, but there are even command line options for.
You should load the crawler docs. Show that.
Yeah, I would need the HDMI cable back.
Yeah.
But it's all documented. You can do that, and I think there's even a debug option for the QA run to dump out into the WAC screenshot diffs when the crawl screenshot and the replay screenshot are different.
I would add though also Docker Desktop, which you're probably using, does now support Kubernetes because Docker support Kubernetes. So if you enable Kubernetes within Docker Desktop, you can run the Helm chart. You can deploy.
Yes.
You can use the local deployment directly on a laptop.
I've done it on here. That's what we do for development. It definitely works.
So even Docker think Kubernetes is the future, so they support it.
Yeah. Are we out of time?
I think we're over time.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're over time. Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
If you come talk to us after, we'll talk to you anyway.